Have the translation working? Yes. Great. So now we have time for the two presentations. We're going to be listening to the experiences, 15 minutes per person, and then after that we'll have more time for discussion. These presentations, in fact, are a bridge or yet another link for us to continue talking about the issue dealt with by Father McVery. You're going to be listening to Dr. Joe Petriello in secondary education in New York province. So before that, he spent 12 years working in the Xavier High School in New York as well. And as well as his work, now he teaches in the faculty of Fordham University. So I'm going to give him the floor. Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning. I want to begin by thanking Peter for his powerful and inspirational words. He's a very tough act to follow, but I hope that some of my reflections this morning about the Companions of St. Francis Xavier service program at Xavier High School will be very beneficial to our continuing conversations today on the compassionate person. CFX is a program that gives our students the opportunity to work with poor and low-income families in various locations. It's very much a service-directed program, as almost all of the organizations that we partner with require volunteer labor to support their respective missions. For a school of 1,000 boys, we currently send about 175 students on several week-long experiences each year. CFX is a program that goes beyond our required Christian service program, which puts students in daycare centers, hospitals, hospices, nursing homes, and soup kitchens locally throughout New York City. This morning, I'd like to focus on just two of our CFX experiences in Robbins, Tennessee, with Appalachia Habitat for Humanity, and in Tijuana, Mexico, with Esperanza International. A Mexican author once wrote, "Poverty is personal. It smells and it shocks and it invades your space. You come home dirty when you get too close to the poor." After a week in Tennessee or Tijuana, our students come home dirty. Their clothes are stained with dirt, sweat, and dried cement. Their work boots are caked with mud and concrete far from home. Their feet and hands sore from the exhausting work of building a new house, literally from the ground up, the memories of which remain when they return to their own homes with minds full of questions and hearts full of gratitude. Most importantly, they come home dirty because they have gotten close to the poor in that very short time. The poor who are no longer this vague group of people that they so easily labeled, coming from their own contexts of privilege or entitlement or affluence as New Yorkers. They now know their names and their faces, their hopes and joys, their stories and struggles with poverty, homelessness, illness, or unemployment. Working with Appalachia Habitat for Humanity, they have dialogued, worked, and prayed alongside people who are first strangers, but then who quickly become neighbors and friends in Christ by the week's ends. They have met Mrs. Reynolds, who at 40 was confined to a wheelchair and had been living in substandard housing her entire life until she received a new Habitat home. They met Sarah Green, a 74-year-old retired factory worker and widow of 18 years, who previously lived in a home such in disarray that it was beyond repair. She now lives and cares for her bedfast sister Frances in a dignified home. Our students at Xavier have listened to the struggles of Greg Smith, severely unemployed while trying to raise 3 small children on his own, and his hopes for their future in a new Habitat home. They listened to the stories of Jack Carroll, a widowed military veteran, and presented him with a flag at the home dedication and blessing of his new house. And at the new home blessing for the Dunphy family, as the young daughters cried quietly with joy for the new life they were about to begin. As one student volunteer reflected on his last evening before returning home, My time in Tennessee made me realize what it means to be a true man for others. My faith grew stronger because the greatest gift we have is the ability to give to others. From the perspective of the Habitat staff, the impact of volunteers from Jesuit schools like Xavier, Fordham Prep, and Rockhurst is felt in many ways beyond the home construction. The local community also benefits from supplies and food purchased locally, which employs local people. Many times over the course of the years we return to work with them, past families who received new Habitat homes will open their doors to Xavier students and faculty members and alumni to visit and see the difference that safe, decent, affordable housing has made to their families. In thanking our students, Sandy Sperling, the director of Appalachia Habitat, always tells our boys before we leave, remember, you have never truly lived until you have helped someone who can never pay you back. While I'm very aware of the criticisms leveled against such short-term service and immersion programs that can dangerously fall into the trap of poverty tourism, I believe that there is still a place for such programs in offering our young women and men direct experience with realities that are radically different than their own. The key to this is building long-term partnerships in collaboration with organizations like Appalachia Habitat for Humanity and like Esperanza that can allow the seeds of the experience for both the school and the local communities to take root over an extended period of time. For both of these organizations, as I explained more fully on the handout you have before you, we've been partnering with them for well over 12 years now, and that long-term partnership has made an impact on our school culture and on their local communities. The four cornerstones of CFX are community, simplicity, prayer, and service. They become the foundation upon which rests our entire efforts. Every experience is also modeled off the Ignatian pedagogical paradigm of experience, reflection, and action, which in many ways mirrors what Peter was saying about see, judge, and act. The rhythm of each day that we are in Tennessee or Mexico begins with morning prayer led by our students, meals prepared for each other, cleaning up the volunteer house and washing dishes, which they don't often do at home, and the parents are pleasantly surprised that they bring that back with them as well. And they work alongside staff on the construction of brand new homes for and with families that deserve to live in dignified housing, where they can be safe, provide for their children, and have the stability necessary to move forward among so many struggles in their lives. In the evening, we enter into fellowship with the local community, sharing dinner, prayer. In Tennessee, we have a potluck dinner at the Habitat office and prayer at Rugby Road Methodist Church. We join in conversation with new homeowners and families still waiting to receive a new home and hoping that maybe next summer, when Xavier comes back, it'll be their chance to build alongside of us as well. In Tijuana, our boys visit a local orphanage as well as the westernmost part of the U.S.-Mexico border, dialoguing with Esperanza staff and families about the complex issues of poverty, violence, and immigration as the border fence strikingly cuts into the Pacific Ocean. Finally, we end each day back at the volunteer house to pause and to stop and to reflect and pray. We give our students 30 to 45 minutes of silence, and in their reflection journals, they spend time with scripture and spiritual writings related to a particular theme for the day, either based on Catholic social teaching, Ignatian spirituality, or often both. At the end of a busy day, we then ask them to be silent and still in God's presence, to interiorly savor what they've experienced in Tijuana or in Tennessee, and then come and bring that to shared reflection and prayer. Over the course of our seminar these 4 days, we've reflected on the relation of the conscious and competent person to the harsh realities of our world, at once filled with suffering, violence, ecological destruction, and countless injustices. It is too overwhelming for our students most times. But we also invite them to see a world alive with hope, love, and grace. Peter spoke beautifully earlier of God's dream for the world and inviting our students to participate in that dream of God's kingdom, God's reign, where there will be no more suffering, where the hungry are fed and the homeless are sheltered. And maybe for just 1 week in Tijuana or Appalachia, we contribute just a little bit to make that dream more of a reality. In the spirit of Christ and following the example of Ignatius, it's our responsibility as Jesuits and Ignatian educators to create the time and the space for our young people to encounter God's grace in the midst of the darkness and uncertainties of a world they are just beginning to know in more real and more complex ways. In a small way, but one with great impact for our students and those with whom they work alongside, we can see Christ at work in our shared efforts, in our building of community, and in our shared prayer and deep critical questions for one another. Upon his return from Tijuana, one student reflected, "My life has been changed forever. It has strengthened my commitment to help anyone who is in need. I've been taught how to find God in all things, not by the work we were given, but by the love of the people we encountered." Two of those people were Sylvia and Jose, who finally came up with enough money to purchase the necessary materials to build their new house: bags of cement, sand, gravel, rebar, and wire. Sylvia and Jose lived in an extremely small 2-room wooden house with their 7 children. There was no indoor plumbing or bathroom, and the family had to go next door to their grandmother's house to use an outhouse whose wooden door did not properly close. That summer, our group spent the week digging the new foundation, laying cinder blocks, making ceiling tiles and beams, and pouring the cement floor in an onslaught of buckets passed in a chain of 40 people for 2 hours straight. One day I finally remember Eduardo, Esperanza's volunteer coordinator, giving me, in his words, a special job just for the teachers in charge. And what he asked me to do was bend rebar into 500 small triangles that would then be used to assemble the ceiling beams and the floor beams in the new house that is entirely constructed by cement. Clearly, I was struggling with this, and I was tired, and Sylvia's son Juan came over, and he made fun of me for a little bit, and then he kind of jumped right in and helped me make sure those triangles were perfect. And we spent the entire day together, just me and him, working on that, and in my broken Spanish, trying to connect with him. And it just showed me at that moment how this young boy, in building his own house, alongside so many of us who come from so far away, and he had so much more to give me and to teach me in supporting me in my struggle to do my job well. Our students treated Sylvia's children as younger brothers and sisters. They played soccer during breaks. They laughed. They played games. One of the seven children, a young girl, had cerebral palsy. While her 6 brothers and sisters would run around the street, play, and help with the cooking, Yamili was confined to sitting in a large, worn-down baby stroller in the back of her wooden house. Although at 7 years old, she was clearly too big for it. Because of her illness, she could not move her frail body. Her thin arms and legs lay stiff all day as she suffered through the heat and the flies that would land on her face. Unable to brush them away with her own hands, she remained immobile, helpless, and clearly in pain. It was Stephen, a quiet student in our group of 48 students and 16 teachers, who first noticed her sitting like this in the corner of the room. While most of the group was busy slinging dirt and rocks to clear the foundation, Stephen decided to sit with Yamili all afternoon, gently brushing the flies away, talking to her in Spanish, feeding her, and trying to make her as comfortable as possible. I think sometimes we can overcomplicate our educational approaches, even in our ministry, service, and justice programs. Sometimes the ministry of presence is the path through which Jesus teaches us his ways, just as important and just as necessary as all of those buckets of cement to build a home for a family of 9. There is a place on CFX for the student who is determined to build that house in 5 days, and there is a place for the quiet student who stops building in order to be a companion to a sick girl. Both are signs of Christ's love working in and through them. A Xavier alumnus recently wrote to me, and I think his words capture some of the success that we hope for in running this program. He said, My experience with CFX opened up my mind and heart to the idea of reaching out to people in need. I learned that acting with compassion is conducive to growing both spiritually and intellectually. I learned that helping those in need is not just volunteering for a week and then returning to the routine of my own life. It is an attitude of solidarity and love that I strive to maintain wherever I go. This attitude sometimes involves a fear of going to new places and experiencing new cultures and people, but this very fear pushes me to further expose myself to the different cultures of the world and to be present with those in need. At the end of the day, there is a human spiritual connection that goes beyond culture and even religion. Because of the incredibly positive and meaningful experience I had at Xavier, I've continued to work in volunteer programs in Mexico and India at Fordham University. God is already at work in the ordinary, everyday moments of our students' lives. We need to remember that when offering them opportunities to encounter the poor and suffering. In their own Emmaus experience, our students will meet Christ in their new neighbors and friends on the road to Tennessee, to Tijuana, where God leads them next on their emerging and unfolding journeys of life. At Xavier, I've been privileged to work with so many teachers, administrators, and alumni who accompany our students and bring their own experiences back into the classrooms to help them wrestle with the questions of complex social injustices and action needed for change. Our commitment to solidarity as a school is always growing, but we have come a long way in recent years and hopefully will continue to explore new and creative ways to participate in God's dream. While I can't take credit for the decision to call our program Companions of St. Francis Xavier, the word companions is a fitting choice of ordinary people breaking bread with one another, building houses together, sharing meals, stories, and prayers, to be Eucharist for one another in a broken world so in need of love and solidarity. What greater gift can we expect in our students than their openness to face their world with generous hearts on fire because they have met Christ in the poor and marginalized? It is only a beginning, a step along the way that we all share as companions, sharing the good news that our students and those they meet are loved by one another and loved by God. Thank you.
Gracias, Joe.
Thank you. Now we're going to be invited Hugo Alexis Moreno, Father Hugo Alexis from Colombia, to give us the second experience. While Hugo Alexis comes along, I'll be introducing him. Hugo Alexis is a rector in the San Bartolomé Mayor School in Bogota. He's also the director of the Latin American organization of Flaxseed Schools, that is 96 schools of the Society of Jesus in Latin America. He's going to be talking about a social program carried out in the educational units of Colombia. Thank you, Hugo Alexis. You have the floor. And 15 minutes, remember. Good morning, everybody. What I'm going to be talking to you about today is the training experience in social education, an experience we carry out in all the schools of the Society of Jesus in Colombia. The idea of this program is to go into more depth in the knowledge of marginal reality of many people in our country and get people to know about it, and to actually also focus on this helping the poor, something that we defend in the Society of Jesus. I'm very thankful to be able to share this with you and to talk about this training in social intervention. It has a lot to do with the compassionate and solidary person that we're talking about today. Undoubtedly, in our schools everywhere in the world, we have many experiences that contribute a lot to the development of a solidary, compassionate person. Allow me to share with you the one that we live specifically in these schools in Colombia, in the San Bartolomé Mayor School as well, where I work. It's an experience developed, as in the case of other locations in the world, on the basis of similar experiences. So, this experience in training in social action started in 1994 in one of our schools in Colombia. And after 1986, eventually things started happening in the other schools of the society as well. The development of the experience involves many subject areas because it is developed as well from the beginning, when students start at 4 years of age and goes right up to 11th year when students complete the secondary education. And there are 4 areas. One is socialization, that goes from the students being 4 to 7. Then development of conscience, 7 to 12. Community training from 12 to 15 years of age of the students. And social service, which is the last part of the experience and goes from 15 to 17 years of age. And this experience is part and parcel of the standard regular curricula of our schools. The aim of this program is to contribute to the complete whole training of our students and making sure that at an early age they get to know and analyze gradually social reality on the basis of the evangelical and civic values, assuming then a commitment and also developing a commitment towards the needy, in order to have a more fair society based on participation. The goal is to be attained by getting students to come close to solidary experiences with the needy, with the poor, in such a way that they accompany and go into depth at a personal level, and so that they can reflect in different scenarios and realities of marginal experiences in which many people in our country live, unfortunately. Undoubtedly, this experience makes specific solidarity become more intense, and it develops the evangelical values of our students and also their values and action as citizens. In order to work on and get close to these marginal societies, we look for an identification and selection of organizations and institutions that work with people that for one reason or another have become marginal and live on the borders of society, because the idea is to share in each and every one of the different stages of this full education, and in order to work on compassion and closeness and solidarity with our students. One of the examples would be children in vulnerable situations because of families with drug problems, because of the fact of the family being non-existent to these children living on the streets. Also, our students deal with the elderly, they deal with homeless people and with radically poor people, and with other groups that are vulnerable in specific areas in Bogota or in the areas where the schools are. The experience has 3 moments. The first moment is the previous preparation of the students before they actually encounter the community that they're going to get to know. And this is where we work contextualization and getting the students ready for the experience. This first step is essential because it makes students understand the context of the experience in which they're going to be participating, and they get ready to live the experience not as just another visit or a trip, but rather a possibility, something that is going to allow them to have a deep and critical view of other realities and other contexts very different from their own. Furthermore, they are prepared for the encounter with the other, with a specific human being living conditions of duress, abandonment, and exclusion from society. Said in this way, the previous preparation for this social intervention makes students start to become aware of this all and be more evangelical, because they try and understand the reality and the contexts of human beings in different approaches. In the second moment, we have the experience of social action per se. This is when students of the schools leave the classroom, they leave their close everyday realities, they leave their comfort zones, and they go out to know and share and do things with other people in other realities, in other worlds, and especially with other human faces from which they learn how to analyze social reality and life itself. This experience of the social intervention program takes place during 1 or 2 days, depending on the stage and the age of the students. That means, for example, that in the San Bartolomé school where I work, we have 1,726 students, and they all live one of these experiences every year in this social action program. And it is also an experience open to the staff of educators and administrative collaborators of the school. Throughout this experience of social insertion, students carry out the activities that have been prepared previously with the whole community. And that means social and personal enriching in two ways. How? First of all, direct activity as a means to get to know the other, and the students are invited to accompany, listen, and share the life of these other people. Second way is to recognize the other not as an object of study or transient pity, but rather as a subject of solidarity and compassion that wants social respect and identity in the development of a better humanity. This experience through preschool and primary and secondary years means a way to learn how to reflect and act, and this makes people know about institutions and organizations and ways of working these different realities. Then comes the moment of experience, the encounter with the community, and this is essential for a complete education of our students. It goes to the very heart of the Ignatian pedagogical experience, that is to allow them to question and ask about their own identity once they have the focus and the approach of the other, of the excluded person, of the poor person, of the other, and essentially the approach of the vision of Jesus. So then this social action program is based on a compassionate individual. It makes it possible for students to leave the classroom, forget the academic sphere, and actually move the classroom and move the world of academia outside to other realities. And that means to the encounter of the other. In other words, this FAS or social action program means that we can make our students competent, compassionate, aware, and we make them work with their own solidarity and sense of justice so that they can eventually understand better what social justice is all about. By means of this FAST program, a training for social action, we see the students encounter suffering, and this way we can develop the possibility of them learning how to answer the challenges of Colombian society. And you also empower students who become so active social agents, and the focus of their action will be precisely compassion and solidarity. That is, I believe, where we have the significant specificity of this experience in our schools, because FAS, this training for social action, does away with that typical idea of getting students to discover something and not see it ever again, but rather they live the experience. And what we do, as I said before, is transfer the classroom and take it outside to these other places with these other people. And it goes much beyond the academic goals of the program. It means that students can start building a different kind of community because they have a different vision, they see other realities, and they learn about suffering. It's an experience then that we see as very enriching, and it develops and stirs compassion. This training for social action means students become part of a suffering world, and at the same time they can develop a greater awareness and sensitivity, and they can go towards a committed praxis against the injustices of the world. The third moment of this training for social action program is the post-FAS. That is when we go to reflection, to feedback, and to the assessment and evaluation of the experience. The idea there is for the students to find in the pedagogical space of the classroom also a space that allows them to think about what it is that leads their lives and their projects, and what is at the basis of their Ignatian education, and how to build social and human justice. I could say that the results achieved with this experience of the Training for Social Action program are, amongst many, the following. First, students gain a critical conscience because they have this direct contact with marginal groups. They become very sensitive and aware of the fact that excluded people are there, and it makes them want to build a society that is based on justice and equality. Young people then become compassionate individuals, and that means that later on they go and they come closer to social and pastoral type activities, and in that way they develop further their Christian commitment. They go on to camps and refugee social services, many things like that. Experiences like this one make the teaching of the school be more and more contextualized on the basis of the specific reality of the socially excluded persons. And this generates direct commitment within the young people of the schools. And last but not least, this experience have made the social awareness of our students become much greater. And that means they come and they go much closer to the excluded societies, which is so important of the pedagogy and spirituality of Ignatian schools. I could say, in fact, that on the basis of this experience, many questions are born within our students, and they become fundamental questions for them to make professional decisions when they go to university. They are questions that have to do with the social emphasis of their later studies. I think really that in a similar way to what our previous general said, it's so important to have your head, your heart and your hands together, right? That is to have the conviction, affection and action all together. And if there is something that defines the experience of social training in our schools in Colombia, I think it is all mediated by what Father Kolvenbach would say, and that's the way I want to end with this quote. What does he say to us? This decadent opting for the poor is not just a transient fashion, uncomfortable, I should say, for some. The last document of the Congregation for Catholic Education typifies a Catholic school as a school for all, with a special attention to the weakest, and it mentions the new poor. Not only the Church, but also international bodies and organizations have placed the poor in the forefront of the world scenario. It's time now to work for them. It's not an issue for discourse, it's an issue for practice, for action, the quality that we've been talking about, the competence, the results, the efficiency. The practice in our centers, in our schools, has to be measured as well from the standpoint of the poor. Once again, I would like to say what I have said so many times to schools and universities and colleges of the Society of Jesus. We should demand, we should request from all our students that they live the option for the poor as a criterion in such a way that they never make an important decision without thinking first and foremost in what way it might affect those that are at the very bottom of the echelons of society. I think that this kind of experience, this kind of living has to be profound in all our daily work so that those decisions always count with the presence of the poor and the excluded in society. Thank you.
Hugo, y de nuevo gracias a Joe.
Thank you, Joe, for having shared with us these experiences, which, as I was saying before, we listened to them, are, of course, something that makes us continue to discuss what is the central subject discussion of today, the training or the education of the compassionate person. Once again, I'm going to give you a few minutes so that you can, reflect and think on what you've been listening to and see in what way Father McVery's presentation now gets to you. So we have time as well to talk to each other. So in a few minutes, we open a 20-25 minutes plenary discussion session before we go to the personal reflection session that will be the end of this morning's activities. So 2-3 minutes individually, and after that, we continue with the conversation with our neighbors.
Estamos con el tiempo ahora para una conversa con los que están más cercanos.
We're having a conversation with people that are very close to us, here next to us. So we are going to devote 2 or 3 more minutes to this debate, and then we start a general one.
Los gringos lo atraparon. Muy bien. Desde donde yo estoy,
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, please. Thank you. From here, I have a very privileged vision in the sense that I'm able to observe the conversation dynamics of the group. And I suppose that this has been the same every day. I mean, from the moment in which we invite for the conversation, usually conversations start being just a conversation of two, very discreet, but now groups are becoming larger, and we have groups of 3, groups of 4, and I believe that this shows a very interesting movement, a very interesting way to know which is the best dynamic for us in our nature. So the idea, the precise point is to have this conversation a little bit enlarged, and hopefully people following us by internet will be able also to talk and with larger and larger groups. And I do also believe that it's important to speak aloud and explain what the groups are reflecting upon. That's why it's important to raise the hand, speak up, then write down. And so we are going to give the different turns now. We have 3 or 4 of you. Antonio at the end. I suppose that you know the order, so please raise your hands and we start. Luis Ugalde, from the province of Venezuela. I'm the education delegate of the provincial congregation of Latin America. This morning, in Peter's intervention, which was great, by the way, he mentioned something which is important. He talked about slavery and what could be done at that time to alleviate the suffering of slaves, but we were not really struggling against slavery at the time. So this should be now translated into education, quality education for everyone. Millions of people are receiving either very bad education or no education. So the poor person that receives a poor education stays in poverty all the time in the 21st century. So we have been talking about the person of competence, and we have said that the child really needs a series of tools. I think that the Society of Jesus has to identify itself against this slavery of the 21st century, which is the bad education for the majority of the poor. We cannot solve everything, but this should be part of our identity, the identity of educators, parents, the principals, everyone part of this second nature. Poor education means perpetuating poverty.
Sí, ya. En mi experiencia...
According to my experience, after some spiritual research, I found in Ignatian spirituality is something very real, very incarnate. And I thought that the Society of Jesus invited me to incarnate myself. And I think that Father Peter really was very precise and to the point and very moving. And he's talking to us about not only what the society is asking us, but also the church. If we want to struggle against poverty and for justice, I was wondering, do we really know what we are doing? Are we really ready to live this third week of the spiritual exercises? And I start thinking in the father of a family who is really opting for our schools, for the prestige, for the academic excellence given by the Society of Jesus, and then realizing that this young man, this child, can be transformed for something the father had not dreamt of. But we dream of that in our school. So are we ready for that? Are we ready? That's what I'm asking. Are we even ready to lose students? Because that might not be what parents want for their children.
Fabián atrás.
Fabián. Javier Antúnez from the seminar school in Montevideo. I want to follow what we heard of Javier, this issue of compassion and how compassion can and should impregnate the curriculum. Because I think on the basis of my personal experience, we have very good work done on experiences with compassion amongst our students and our alumni, and a lot of work in social voluntary programs that the students do with the alumni. But the staff of our institutions is not really impregnated. It's not really fully involved. And this compassion experience is lived as just an added program to our educational curricula. Students come often after having taken part in very intense experiences that then are not reflected in the classroom because no thinking or reflection is carried out. Even worse, many times after having participated in very successful experiences that have to do with deep compassion, they have immediately after an exam or a test that's very difficult, and it would seem that institutionally we're making them live a certain schizophrenia. That's why I was happy to listen to the Columbia presentation, where it seems they have a full itinerary in such a way that students gradually and progressively incorporate certain competencies into compassion. And it would seem that at an institutional level, it is all acknowledged and they make it legitimate. So I would be interested in learning more about what they do and how they integrate it, and see about teacher training and how to train the managers, the managing or governing bodies in our institutions, because it's essential for the students we want to educate. It shouldn't be something that's just lateral. Thank you, Fabian. Pepe, and then after Antonio. Yeah, Pepe Menendez in Barcelona. I think that regarding the level of development of the discussion that we are participating in, right now I should say that to go towards change means, to make that thing of think global, act local true. Because to think global means listening to what we're listening to here, our experiences. I myself as well, when I was the director of the John 23, there was a mother who was a prostitute in the classroom. I mean, that in Spain is something unheard of, to get the mother coming in to accompany her. So all of us have experiences, and globally we are able to see the importance of fighting against structures, and also to do something about increasing the level of awareness and conscience of our students. But as Javier was saying, for so many years I've been an educator in a Jesuit center, and before I was a student, this has been an ongoing debate. And maybe now we're starting to see that the problem that we had was dissociation, precisely. So social commitment was an extracurricular activity. And in the classroom, it was not reflected. That way of seeing the world wasn't part of what was done in the classroom. So now what's changing in the methodology, what is beginning to change in the classrooms, in the physical spaces, and the fact that students are put in the center, and all this means the possibility, beware, it's not automatic, it has to be worked for, you have to incorporate it. So then the possibility of making those 4 C's be fully integrated, because if that is not the case, we can go on discussing, thinking that the world is something else. And one reality of our schools is that sometimes in one same city, we have schools of wealthy families with huge social campaign activities that fully ignore the other school, the other Jesuit school, that is placed in a kind of humble neighborhood, and one school looks at the other and they're not really in contact, okay? And the poor school, so to speak, also needs social conscience and social awareness, and also has to realize what its role is in the world. So then this call to networking is also a call not to dissociate this dual reality that we experience. Thank you, Pepe. Antonio. Antonio España of the El Recuerdo School in Madrid. Connecting yesterday's experience of Manresa, Montserrat, and today, I have a question that maybe I should write on the wall outside. The spirituality of ire or the spirituality of hope? Peter has been very challenging, and he talked about anger, but I don't know, what we had yesterday and what's happening today. Can we connect it in a spiritual Ignatian manner that eventually leads us to hope? And second, the examples, both, Peter's and the two experiences we listened to, are making us face a kingdom that's not really a kingdom as a block, but rather something that starts on small things. Bernard on my left was saying that in these experiences, students eventually become creators. They become active persons and small seeds of the kingdom. Yes, another round now? Now, 1, 2, Canada, 3, India, 4, where are you from? Congo, 4. Okay, then we go back to another round.
Barcelona,
Enrique from Barcelona. I have 2 reflections. First one, when we will be able to make it happen for a student to live what we want him to live when we offer him an experience. And this is not something we can really control if the spiritual part of the thing and following the Ignatian inspiration, what Ignacio asked us is to leave the person just to be on her or his own with the Creator and allow for things to happen. So along those lines, I think there is something mysterious which really escapes to what we can control. So I insist, we cannot control everything, even though everything is really a structure. When they reach the last year, will they be able or will they be ready to involve with society as we plan, as we want? So we have to prepare for things we might not be ready for this kind of a special reality. And I think that the important point here is the context. In theology, we talked about the theological place from where you do theology. So we could ask ourselves, what's the pedagogical debate? What's the pedagogical place we stand from where we help people to learn how we make people understand that the poor is also reality.
Nada? Sí.
I'm actually finding myself. Somebody used the word feeling a bit schizophrenic, and I think that's a little bit the feeling that I have right now. And the way I want to explain it is a little bit of there's a cartoon that they see in the U.S. and in Canada called South Park. I don't know if people in Latin America have seen it, but it's a silly cartoon. And there's one episode where the main character, a grade school boy, Cartman, ends up meeting Sally Struthers, and he brings home a starving child from Africa. And the kids nickname him Starvin' Marvin. And he brings him to class for show and tell and shows him to the other kids. And then he brings him, there's a town meeting, and he's showing Starvin' Marvin to everybody. And everybody's so moved by his story that they start taking canned goods and throwing it at Starving Marvin to give him some food and all that. And they walk away feeling so good about themselves because they've done such a good deed. And it's set up and it looks like a carnival, and he's sitting in a booth and they're throwing canned goods at him. That image for me sometimes sticks with what we do potentially can be doing with some of our service work. And I guess this is where the schizophrenia is coming from. Are we preparing our kids to be the second type of person in the exercises? The exercises is all about that tension between my desires and my will and the desire to abandon those to God. But what we do in the schools and with our educational system, including the education that we do with the poor, can often be to give them their desires. And then at the same time, spiritually, try and form them to abandon those desires. And that tension, I think, is it's just bothering me. So I'm bringing it up more as a question. When I heard Father McVeary, that's the abandonment. That's the, give it all. And then when I think of the service work, it's okay, we're going to make you doctors and lawyers where you'll have a lot of money. And out of your excess, you can give to the poor and it'll make the world better. I'm not sure that fits with the experience yesterday, with the experience of what we have from the exercise. And I don't have an answer for that. I don't even have a suggestion in terms of saying, well, this is what we need to do. It's just something that's striking me as something that's a little bit schizophrenic, that may, in fact, be a source of the tension that we have in how to go about the kinds of things that we're doing. We're talking about, well, we'll come up with these programs, but what are we trying to do? I think that the answer lies in the nature of person, not about material constructs and things, but about the nature of person. And I think the answer is somewhere in there, but I just wanted to offer that as a reflection.
Thank you. A la mitad de la sala.
Thank you. There was somewhere else here from India, I guess, if I'm not wrong.
I would like to speak from the context from which I come from. I see the two types of schools here in India. One is catering to the poor and the other is catering to the rich. But though the atmosphere help in the institutions where we cater to the poor, but still I am really, from my own experience, I see that the social commitment, the fighting against unjust structure, it seems to be very difficult given to the structure of the schools there. Because we are all bothered about only the curriculum and day-to-day activities, but still, though we have various organizations through rural exposure program, like leadership and social awareness, but still it's a long way to go. But this is my personal experience, that after having had experience of nearly more than 15 to 20 years in the school as a principal and coordinator, I feel that I think I find it very difficult. I should get out of this and join this association of Peter like this. Okay.
Gracias, Padre. Ahora acá, de Congo.
Representative for Congo.
I want to start with a Chinese proverb saying that you better teach to a poor how to fish rather than giving him a fish. I'm saying this because from the experiences that we have heard, especially after the break, is that showing how we are forming our students to be men and women for and with others, to show their solidarities with the others. And this is not really solving the problem. For me, the main problem is to go to the roots, to try to put an end to the causes of what brings these problems. Today, if we say that they are street kids, the question must be, why do the kids run away from their families? Is it for lack of love? Is it for lack of food? Or for other reason? If we see today that there is a situation of injustice in the world, why do we have those situations of injustice? Is it because people cannot reconcile themselves? Is it because of lack of food? Or there is any other cause? So for me, it is better for us to go to the roots. And when Father Luis Ugalde said that we need to provide quality education to the poor, this is already something. Because somebody who has learned to fish and cannot fish because whenever he fishes, somebody else is coming to steal, to pick up his fish. He will not be encouraged to continue fishing, even if I've learned it. Can we say today that we have means to influence public policies, international cooperations? Because I think the main point of poverty, inequalities, injustice is maybe around that. And if we are capable of influencing public policies, everything can change on the world. I would say in short, in the context of Africa, there would be no war if there were not factories making guns.
Gracias. Abrimos para otro.
Thank you. Just another round now. Anybody else?
Ross Jones from St. Ignatius in Sydney. Just to add something to the previous comment made about schizophrenia in our actions, so that we don't do things for the wrong reasons. At the end of our journal that the boys use on their immersion program in the Philippines, one of the last exercises is to remind the boys of the story of Ignatius here in Manresa when he gave away all his clothes to the poor beggar, thinking he was doing something very good. And then the beggar was arrested for being a thief. And we are told that Ignatius wept at that. So I retell that story in the journal to the boys and ask them the question, at the end of this immersion, is there anything that you have done from a very good intention, something said or something done that was really insensitive or inappropriate and not reflected on properly before you undertook it? And we hope that that is a lesson that they will take with them in their future endeavors to share the lives of the poor.
Gracias.
Thank you, Father Ben.
Peter said that compassion is not just a Christian value, and what I would like to share is that I find that some of the best lessons I have learned are from non-Christian groups. No, for example, I'm working with groups in the Philippines very concerned about hunger among children, and the group that we are learning from is a Hare Krishna group in India, Akshaya Patra, which according to their website feeds about 1.2 million children every school day. We have visited their commissaries in Bangalore, where they have 2 commissaries which provides 100,000 meals each a day, and we're not quite there. We do about 50,000, but so I'd like to say that we learn from them. And in the disaster that hit Typhoon Haiyan, the group that has given the most is a Buddhist foundation from Taiwan, Chuchi Foundation, led by a Buddhist nun. So what I want to share is that we're now talking about structures of the world. These are huge things. We can contribute, but there are others that are out there that sometimes are bigger and better than us, and we can learn from them and work with them. So I try to work with these groups, and I think the young people I work with are learning from them and working with them. So perhaps we could expand our vision. As Peter said, we're not the only ones that have compassion. There are other groups, and some are more successful than we are, and we could also learn from them.
Gracias, Padre.
Thank you, Father. Casey, last, and then we continue with the preparation for individual reflection time.
Casey Bomir from United States. So I'm trained as an historian, and the work I did was in the 1960s and the 1970s in the secondary network in America. And I looked at the tension between what I call the eliting of Jesuit education and then the emergence of the preferential option for the poor. So I'm not having an experience of schizophrenia here, but I'm having an experience of deja vu. Like I feel like we're repeating conversations that were so important in the network of secondary education in the 1960s and early 1970s. So I value very much Peter's input this morning because it harkens back to some roots in our conversations globally in the secondary network. And I would maybe point to something in the exercises that meets us where we are, and I would say it's Ignatian repetition. The repetition in our tradition isn't going back and repeating, but it's repetition that deepens. We're drawing deeper from these roots of earlier conversations where the secondary network, I think, quite frankly, was correct in those earlier deliberations. But in today's context, I think it's to be drawing deeper in that notion of a faith that does justice, but where the bad spirit, I think, is at work is in making the network feel like it needs to go either or. either or. Either we're with the rich or we're with the poor. I think our network is best when we have this ability to be with both. And I think that harkens back to what I was saying a couple days ago about influence, that we want to have influence in the structures so that we can move the structures. And in my study, when institutions when they came out of a spirit of anger, those institutions didn't survive. It was when anger was transformed into, I think, Christian joy. Think about the joy of the gospel from Pope Francis. When we're motivated by joy, influence multiplies. And that multiplier effect is when a Jesuit school, I think, really does have transformative power. And that's AMDG for the future. So I'm grateful for our conversation this morning. I'm perplexed by the déjà vu, but I see it as Ignatian repetition. And I think we owe Peter a debt of gratitude for helping us to see that and experience that in a deeper way.
Gracias, Casey.
Thank you, Casey. Before I suggest the route for personal reflection, I was just waiting for my moment to come, but I'm going to be very good, maximum 3 minutes. First of all, well, yes, indeed, I was thinking how much we have grown from the first day to today. The discussion, the dialogue happening in this room, I remember the first day, and I don't know to what point you share this thought with me, but I did comment it to some people, and it's natural that this happens. On the first day, I got the impression that it was kind of, a community of deaf people talking. Yes, one stops and talks, the other stops and talks, but we were all coming, representing our positions very well, and saying what we had come to say on the basis of what we had listened to as a reaction to what had been triggered. And, well, we had just arrived, so it was normal that this should be so. And then eventually we see the universal way in which things happen. The day before yesterday and yesterday. Well, all this eventually has helped us to understand deeply really what this gathering, this meeting is all about. What is it? It is a place that goes beyond not only physically, but also epistemologically, and I would even dare say spiritually, goes beyond the experience that each one of us has come along with. And so here we are coming together. We have so many people as well that are with us in so many different locations in the world. And we are here to talk what the challenges of education in the Society of Jesus, wherever any school may be. Never mind if we are talking from one place or another, though obviously we all do talk from the everyday experience in our lives. So then here we have to be able to get subjects arise that can be implemented and that can actually trigger contextualized reflection in any place in the world in which there is somebody of the Society of Jesus. And that's why I am so happy to be moderating this session today. I see that what is happening as tension, and this was mentioned already by some, so should be seen as something positive, because it makes us want to continue with our conversations, making the tension more and more explicit, because it is a constitutional part of our institutional identity, and I hope it is part of our personal identity too. If we don't consider that tension is something that's part and parcel of our being, and we should welcome tension and even look for it, well, then we run the risk of, feeling too comfortable. That would be dangerous. And then precisely this meeting means this: let us not be comfortable, let us continue our journey, and let us not do more of the same, but let us go on to something different. Because we've said it so many times, haven't we? The context changes, circumstances change. What does not change is our aim, which is part of the tenets in the spiritual exercises, and that we always have in our minds. I have 2.40, so 20 seconds. My last remark. In our words, in our conversation, I find it interesting that we're always talking about the for bit. Yeah, we educate for justice, we educate for solidarity, and I think we should change this little word by another, and that might change things a lot. It would be to educate in, because then that doesn't detract. It doesn't make us leave the school, although we might leave it physically, but it may open the doors of the school in such a way that in every school, amongst people who might belong to the same social class, they are living their learning practice, their learning daily practice on the basis of solidarity. When I was at the school, I said to the teachers, I said, I don't know how you want to educate people who work on solidarity if the first tenet of your school is that you forbid to lend materials to the other peers in class. How can you educate somebody to be doing things based on solidarity if you don't let the students lend things to each other? And that is really the end, because that's 3 minutes. And I go back now to being a chairperson to invite you all to this half hour we have up till 1 o'clock, time for lunch, to reflect and do it on the basis of contemplation. So then we should contemplate incarnation as the inspiration for what we might think of and reflect on during this half hour. Considering, as the text suggests, that the Trinity looks at the world and observes the diversity of the world. And other than the terrifying view of seeing so many people being born and dying and crying and laughing and fighting and living in peace in so many places, the feeling inspired in the Trinity is love. This is what we are told by Ignatius. And then love that encompasses everything as part of itself and decides to be part of. So in that key then, I would invite you all to take this half hour up to lunch in order to travel and make the right hemisphere be somewhat more active for half an hour. Choose the means of transport you wish, but do leave your place. Leave the country where you live, leave the school where you work, take a boat, take a donkey, take an airplane, whatever, and try and travel greatly throughout the world, using as a map not only the imagination of where will I travel, what will this look like, what will that land be like, but try and visualize the faces and the voices of the people here. Because we have the world sitting in this room already. The subtitle of this gathering is telling us that the world is our house. And truly, yes, we are all living in one single house and we represent practically all the different parts of the world. So, starting this contemplative exercise, I would invite you to try and remember all the faces and I hope names and places of precedence of the people that you might have been listening to in this room. And then make all this come to your hearts and to your heads and remember what was said. And on the basis of all this, travel and think. And now, yes, we go to the question that Father McVeary was asking at the end of his presentation. Was it worthwhile? So much immersion? In one case, it was talking of this déjà vu. I was wondering, well, yeah, of course, many of us might repeat the same thing, that this is a long conversation and rather repetitive at times. I think that seen from the vision of the Trinity and the experience of the contemplation of incarnation, it is not something that is all that old. It is much more current. And that's why I would like us all to wonder, by looking at the world's diversity, if what we have truly done has been worthwhile. Is it worth a while to continue? Is it worth a while to go on? And to do so with an incarnation exercise, with the answer of love and encompassing of all diversity in the world. So I hope you have a very good reflection time. Enjoy. And at 1 o'clock, we meet for lunch in the dining room. So please just concentrate. And as you know, the best is always to go forward, don't change. So, good reflection. We meet again at 1 o'clock and then after at 3 o'clock in this room again. Thank you.